Hello everybody, today we're going to be talking about a little bit about the basics of arrhythmia. Now in order for you to understand arrhythmias, you have to know some basic physiological normal functions. Now first let's talk a little bit about the heart anatomy. The heart is, as you know, is composed of 4 chambers. We have 2 atria, we have a right and a left atrium. We have 2 ventricles, we have a right and a left ventricles. Now the atria are actually going to be receiving blood from the veins, and they're going to be pumping that blood to the ventricles, and the ventricles will then pump that blood out to the arteries to the rest of the body. So I can demonstrate this right here. You have 4 chambers. On the top you have a right atrium, and you have a left atrium, and then you have a right ventricle, and you have a left ventricle. Now the right atrium and the left atria are going to be receiving blood from veins. The right atrium from the inferior and superior vena cava, the left atrium from the pulmonic veins, and then the right ventricle is going to be pumping out to the artery through the pulmonic artery, and the left ventricle is going to be pumping blood to the aorta to the rest of the body. A very important concept that you have to be familiar with in order for you to understand arrhythmias is that the heart is a sensation. That means the heart is just one being. Now this connection is achieved via gap junctions. Now gap junctions are basically just tubes or pipes that connect one cell to another. It connects all the cells, the adjacent and the neighboring cells, to one another. And what they do is that they allow the passage of ions from one cell to the adjacent cells. And as you know, electrical activity and action potentials in excitable cells is basically just ions that are floating. The ions that are positive ions or negative ions that are floating in and out of the cell, causing this action potential. And when those gap junctions allow the ions to flow from one cell to another, they spread this action potential to the adjacent cells. Right here is my little demonstration. Now those squares are representing cardiac myocytes, and those lines, connections right here, representing gap junctions. Now if you get an action potential going on right here, you get all those positive charges flowing in, and this cell is going to again contract. Those positive ions are going to flow to the adjacent cell via this gap junction. That adjacent cell is also going to be contracting, and all this is going on. This cell will allow the impulses to pass to the adjacent cell, and so on. So you can think about it, one cell being activated is enough so you can activate the whole chamber, and the whole chamber will then contract. Another important concept that you have to be familiar with is that there is an electrical insulation that is going on between the atria and the ventricles. Now if we draw the atria and the ventricles like this is the right atrium, and this is the left atrium, this is the right ventricle, and this is the left ventricle. Now between this right atrium and right ventricle and the left atrium and the left ventricle, between them is a structure called the annulus fibrosus. This is basically just a fibrous ring. What it's going to do is that it's going to insulate the atria from the ventricles. They're electrically insulated from one another, so that electrical impulses cannot pass from the atria to the ventricles, or vice versa from the ventricles to the atria. Now this becomes very important because you do not want the atria to be contracting at the same time with the ventricles. Now the right and the left atria are not insulated from one another. The right and the left ventricle are not insulated to one another. The impulses can pass from the right to left. However, from atria to ventricles, the impulses cannot pass through the gap junctions. Another thing you need to know is that gap junctions are slow. They are relatively slow at conducting those electrical impulses from one cell to the other. And because these gap junctions are slow, the heart chamber is not going to be having an efficient contraction. The cells are not going to be contracting at the same time. There's going to be a delay. A few cells are going to be contracting before the others. And in order for you to have an efficient contraction, you need all the cells to contract almost synchronously at the same time. And this is done through the heart conducting system. So let's talk a little bit about that. The heart conducting system is composed of a collection of specialized cardiac myocytes. Those are cells that are similar to the cardiac myocyte, except they have fewer contractile proteins and they differ in their structure and function. So they have little to no role in the cardiac contractility. However, their main function is the generation and the transmission of electrical impulses throughout the heart. Now, those conducting system cells, they are faster at transmitting those electrical impulses faster than the gap junction, so they lead to a more synchronous and efficient cardiac contractility. This cardiac conducting system connects the atria with the ventricles, and it coordinates the activity between them, thereby surpassing the annulus fibrosus and this electrical insulation. So the only way that electrical impulses pass from the atria to the ventricles is through this conducting system. It is composed mainly from the SA node, the AV node, the bundle of His, the bundle branches, the right and the left bundle branches, and then the Purkinje fibers. So this is demonstrated right here, the heart conducting system. This is the SA node right here. This is the part of the conducting system that actually controls the rate and the rhythm of the heart. The SI node is going to generate impulses, and these impulses will pass to the right and left atria, and then these impulses will pass through the internodal fibers to the AV node right here. The AV node will then receive the impulses and transmit it through the bundle of His to the right and left bundle branches. This is the right bundle branch, this is the left bundle branch, and these will send impulses to the right and the left ventricles respectively. And they terminate into the Purkinje fibers. And these Purkinje fibers, they're multiple, they're really fast, and they're going to send the impulses very fast throughout the whole myocardium of the right and left ventricles. So you can have this really fast coordinated contraction. Now what's very special about those cardiac myocytes is that almost all the cells of the heart can undergo what's called spontaneous depolarization, or the concept of automaticity. This means that excitable cardiac cells can just undergo spontaneous depolarization followed by repolarization. It doesn't need any external stimuli. But what's very important is that some cells have a faster firing rate than others. This means that some cells can generate impulses at a higher frequency than other cells. Now, it's very interesting that the faster cells, the cells that fire at a higher frequency, is actually going to be controlling the cells that are slower, the cells that fire at a lower frequency. Now, I can demonstrate this right here. Now, let's assume we have two cells. The first cell is going to fire at an interval of every 5 seconds, and we have a second cell. The second cell is going to fire at an interval of 10 seconds. And these cells are connected with one another. So after 5 seconds, when the first cell depolarizes, it's going to send impulses to the second cell. The second cell still hasn't depolarized because it needs 10 seconds, and at 5 seconds it has received impulses from the first cell. Now this resets the refractory period so that after the second cell has depolarized, it's going to need another 10 seconds for it to depolarize. And after 5 seconds passes, the first cell is also going to transmit these impulses to the second cell, and the second cell will depolarize again. In this sense, you can understand that the faster cells are going to be the ones that are controlling the slower cells, because they don't allow the slower cells to fire. Now these have been the minimum amount of concepts that you need to know in order for you to understand arrhythmias. You might also need more in-depth knowledge in each concept, and I explain each concept in different videos. Hopefully this has been helpful, and thanks for watching.